I've been using the Godot game engine for about 5 years at this point, so I thought it was a good time to take a step back and do a brutally honest review of all the things I love and hate about the Godot game engine. Now, instead of making this an hour-long video, I've compiled it down to kind of like the top pros and cons. And my biggest con of Godot is that it is a game engine, which seems like an oxymoron because maybe I am a moron, but the problem with a game engine is that it's a generalized tool. It was not designed specifically to help me build Chess Survivors or my new game Hexagod. It was built to build the general game. And eventually or inevitably with every project, I come across an idea or something I want to add to the game that I need to create a hacky solution to get the engine to do what I want it to do. And sometimes that really frustrates me. On the opposite side of it, if you used a framework or built your own engine, if you're doing that, kudos to you. I'm far too dumb to do that. You would be able to build the engine in a way where it would be very tailor-made to the problems you're trying to solve in your game. A game like Noita comes to mind, where they have this falling sand engine where they built this custom way where every pixel is simulated. And it's a game I suck at, but as a game developer, I look at it and I am just in awe of the majesty of what they were able to create with their custom engine, because I have absolutely no idea how I would do something like this in Godot. And so generally speaking, I've tried to make games that lean more into Godot's feature set, which is only something you can do once you understand all the tools in the toolbox. But even so, it's been pretty frustrating over the last couple of years to come across a problem or a specific idea for my game and have to come up with some weird and hacky workaround to get it to actually work. But it's not so big of an issue that I've ever realistically considered building my own engine. And it would likely be the case that I'd come across these exact same sort of hacky solutions had I used Unity or Unreal over the last 5 years. And then my biggest pro that I have probably taken for granted over the last 5 years is that Godot is a free game engine to use. It's an open source project, which means it'll be free to use forever. Like that is foundational to how the Godot ecosystem works. Now, full transparency, with my 2 commercial games, Hexagod and Chess Survivors combined, I've made around $30,000, which I'm a math major, so I can tell you is not even close to the $200,000 threshold, which Unity has to require you to start buying the pro license. And it's even further away from the $1 million threshold at which Unreal would start charging you royalty fees for using Unreal. But even given how far away I am from those actual thresholds, as a solo developer trying to make it on my own, there's a certain simplicity and reliability that I get from the fundamental nature that Godot is an open source project. I don't have to worry about them changing their licensing model like Unity did last year or the year before, or having to go back and update old projects because they changed some sort of agreement. Like, there's just a fundamental stability that Godot offers, and it's definitely something I've taken for granted over the last 5 years. Now, something I really don't like about Godot is that there's no native console support for porting your games over to other consoles like the Switch, the Xbox, and the PlayStation. And as somebody who has a bunch of console friends, they can't play my games. And even though I haven't made a game that makes financial sense quite yet to port over to consoles, when I do, because I'm hoping to do it at some point, there's a huge market out there. There's what was $18 billion in 2024. And right now, there's no easy way to do that in Godot, which kind of sucks. Now, the reason that Godot doesn't do native console supporting is because there's legal liabilities, disproportionate costs, and issues with it being an open source project. So I love that it's an open source project, but it also has some drawbacks. And one of those, and in my head, one of the bigger ones, is that they don't have native console supporting. You can read more about this in this documentation here, or they have this really great and lengthy discussion about it as a post they made back in September of 2024. Now, interestingly enough, W4 Games was founded in the last couple of years by a couple of the core contributors to the Godot game engine to solve this problem of not being able to get these licenses for these specific platforms. So now you could partner with W4 Games to be able to port over to the Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox, just like you would for exporting any sort of builds. The drawback is that it's going to cost you money to partner with W4 Games, so it's like $68 per platform. So I guess that's up to like $170 for all platforms, or about $2,000 per year. Now, interestingly enough, I was looking up to see how Unity does this, and you need a Unity Pro subscription or whatever the heck a preferred platform licensing key is, and that Unity Pro license will cost you about $2,000 per year, which is pretty comparable to working with W4. I always thought that Unity, you just got console porting for free, but it's not the case anymore. And so maybe that's kind of a wash if you're looking at Unity versus Godot for console porting, since now W4 exists. And like I said before, I haven't made a game that was profitable enough on Steam yet to make sense for me to port over to consoles, but I hope to in the future, and I'm really hoping that there's more solutions like W4 games out there that allow me to do console porting with Godot. Hey there, Amos from the future here. Xsolla reached out to sponsor this portion of the video to have me share some exciting updates that could be really useful for game developers like us. Now, I didn't know about this, but back on April 30th, 2025, the US District Court made a groundbreaking decision in the Epic v. Apple case. For the first time, developers are now able to direct players in the US from their iOS apps to alternative payment methods like web shops without violating Apple's platform rules or paying their fees. Now, Apple is expected to appeal that decision, so any information presented here is just that. It's information. It's not intended to be legal advice, so please consult your own legal counsel in that regard. That being said, it's already becoming an industry norm to have your own web shop for selling in-app purchases with added value on the web. So if you're looking for a reliable and professional way to set up your own web shop, Xsolla Web Shop is worth knowing about. Xsolla Web Shop is a fully customizable, no-code solution that lets you quickly build a branded storefront with advanced features. And Xsolla only charges a 5% transaction fee, which is a pretty big drop from the typical 30% fee of traditional platforms. It also includes a built-in live ops tool that builds personalized player experiences with exclusive offers, tailored rewards, and additional benefits. Plus, integration is simple. It works with major mobile titles and is already trusted by some of the biggest studios as well as indie developers. So if you're a mobile game developer or any developer looking to monetize your game with a web shop, it's definitely worth checking out Xsolla Web Shop. There's a link in the description below if you want to learn more, and thank you to Xsolla for sponsoring this portion of the video. It's kind of interesting making this honest review of Godot because one of the more shocking things that I love about Godot is not the tools or the capabilities of the engine, but instead it's the community that has been built around the Godot engine. It is an incredible place. You go to the Godot subreddit and you see people posting their little projects or fun little memes or sharing the work they did, really cool ways they've used the engine, and even sharing small little updates about making a single dollar off their game. And you see just a bunch of really supportive comments in here, sharing like kudos to them and trying to lift people up. And if you had problems and issues, people aren't going to be talking down to you or telling you to Google it. They'll simply give you the answer and share their perspective on the problem. And on top of that, because again, Godot is an open source and free engine, I think that has created an atmosphere where the community shares their work openly. I have a lot of different posts and assets I've saved, which is just free code that people have shared. One of my favorite sites of all time, as someone who doesn't know how to use shaders, is GodotShaders.com, which shares a bunch of different and awesome shaders that people have made available to use in your project as you see fit. So I think, from my perspective, the fact that it's an open source game engine that has a GitHub that you could contribute to has seeped into the community around Godot and created some really cool interactions that I've had on the internet, and created one of my favorite little pockets of the internet, being the Godot subreddit. Now, as much as I love the Godot community, it is a smaller user base than, say, Unity. For example, looking at last year's Stack Overflow survey, you can see that Godot is used by 4.4% of respondents, where Unity 3D is used by 5.9% of respondents. And that is not a big gap, but it is still a gap. And I think the biggest thing is that Unity has had a bigger user base for a longer amount of time. So as people have asked questions, there have been more tutorials created on YouTube. There have been more questions asked on the forums. And it's simply the case that in an environment that I think is already getting harder to find like text-based solutions online because people are creating YouTube tutorials, myself included, and people are asking questions in Discord. You're getting more AI garbage on the internet that isn't quite a good solution. Having a smaller user base is just going to make it harder to find questions that have already been answered. And if you're like me, you're a little impatient and you want your answer now. You don't want to wait for a week or so to get somebody to answer it on the forums. The other thing I really like about Godot is GDScript, which is the native language built to support Godot. It is Python-like, and I come from a Python background. That was the very first programming language I learned. And so I just kind of like how simplistic it is, and you can really feel that it was built for the Godot engine. And specifically, there's this feeling I get that the features and things that get added to GDScript are being decided by and like prioritized based off of what developers actually want, not based off of what will make the share price of the company go up. Because again, Godot is an open source project, so there is no share price and there is no owner of it. Like, we all kind of own it, and it's funded by people who donate to the Godot Foundation, and also companies who have pledged donations to that same foundation. So just generally speaking, in the last 5 years, I felt this undertone and seen improvements come through in each version of Godot that make the engine better for developers to use. And I think that's something in the long run that I'm learning I really enjoy about Godot. The next thing I really don't like about Godot is that there's no native asset store. I'm thinking not the Godot asset library, which is great. I'm thinking like the Unity asset store, where you can buy models and you can buy animations and you can buy different things that I imagine are specifically built to be integrated directly into Unity. And I could probably find things I could use on the Unity asset store, but I just want to be able to have some place for me to go to say, oh, let me get a pack full of elemental spell effects, and it just works seamlessly right with Godot. Now, Godot does have that Godot asset library, which is full of add-ons basically that allow you to do specific things that maybe you don't want to handle yourself. The most popular one that I use myself is Godot Steam, which handles connecting into Steam to do leaderboards or get profile information, or maybe sending achievements to Steam and stuff like that. And so there are tons of really great add-ons that can help you make your game better, but there just isn't that same sort of like Unity asset store where I can go and buy assets from that are just usable right away in Godot and kind of integrate seamlessly. And I just get the sense from kind of rumblings on the internet that people who use Unity really do like the Unity asset store. And I think that's a big miss right now in the Godot ecosystem, and that could likely be something to do with it being an open source project. I think one of the biggest things I've taken for granted with Godot is how lightweight of an engine it is, while still being feature rich. Like, I can open my project and it takes seconds to open. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. And that's a full project right there. It takes seconds to run the project. 1, 2, 6, 7. There we go. Now we're in the project. 7 seconds there. And it takes seconds to export the project. And this exports to Windows, Linux, and Mac all together. 3, 4, 9, 10. Boom. There we go. And even though it's a lightweight engine, you're seeing really, really successful indie games come out of Godot, like Brotato, Buckshot, Roulette, Turing Complete, Ballillionaire, and the list goes on. And quite frankly, I think it's going to keep getting more and more as more games come out, like Slay the Spire 2 is being built in Godot. So it's a really, really exciting time for Godot, especially just kind of how usable the engine is from a moment-to-moment basis. I think I've definitely taken it for granted that I can just quickly whip up a project together and get it to be working in kind of that really tight iteration loop as I'm spending my time doing game development. All things considered, I'm fairly surprised that over the last 5 years, I haven't really explored other game engines. And I think partly that's because I'm just focused on trying to make the best games possible. And for me, any of the cons of Godot are not quite big enough to like make me want to switch to other engines and start learning a whole new toolbox of tools. It simply is just good enough for what I need it to do. And I think that's my brutally honest review. I have been Aramis. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.